we'll end with this slide, and then I'll open it up for questions, is that this concept of perception, right? So I went through the three. We talked about environment, we talked about the people that are around, and we talked about now perception. Perception of a young person, perception of a student is so important. We talk about self-esteem or self-concept. Self-esteem, how a person feels about themselves, could be shown in how a person carries themselves, how they sit, how they walk, how they talk. It's my assumption that in some environments, black children aren't treated in a way that acknowledges their brilliance or success. And so they might not speak, not because they don't feel confident or they don't have the esteem, but maybe they just haven't had enough opportunities to share and be heard. And so it's really important that we be mindful that self-concept and self-esteem are vital. So as parents have to ensure they're investing in their young people in a way where they know their value. They know their value. You can't give enough hugs, kisses, and high fives. You can't get enough of it, right? Those things are important. And as I said earlier, it doesn't stop because they get older. A few semesters ago, I was like, I want to try something out. So I started putting stickers on people's quizzes. And you'd be surprised that college students like stickers. They was like, I didn't get a sticker this week. People still need to be celebrated. It helps them feel good about themselves. Self-concept is about how do you see yourself. How you see yourself is instrumental in one's success, not just in school, but in life. If you feel good about yourself, you do things differently. And so we also have to say, looking at what is your historical self, right? Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. Joseph, they talk about knowing who you are historically, your historical experience. Because when you understand that, it helps to shape what? Your identity. Knowing who you are is really important in terms of your self-concept. Also important in terms of how do you perceive yourself. Understanding who you are. This is why the lessons about people of African ancestry are important in terms of what do they receive. Receiving information that uplifts them and helps them to understand the historical legacy and greatness of their people makes them walk and feel differently. When children learn all the negative stories, that doesn't contribute to a positive understanding of self. This is why it's so harmful to start the story in the middle. Slavery is the middle, just in case we didn't know. You can't start the story in the middle. It's like you going to a movie and they be like, what movie you watch? And you was like, well, I watched this. Like, well, tell me about it. And they start the middle of the story. You're going to miss a whole lot. They need to know the origins, the beginnings, right? And typically, the way history is taught in schools, our students are getting about 4% of their history. That's like somebody telling your life story, but they're only telling your life story for the past 10 years, and you like 60. I'm like, well, that 10 years, like, I don't even remember that. So the historical self is instrumental. And then looking at societal barriers, we can't talk about societal barriers enough. What are the issues? What are the barriers? The reason being, we're trying to prepare our young people for what's to come. How do they navigate these spaces? If you don't talk about them, it's going to hit them in the face. And you don't wait until they have the problem. You don't wait until a child get hit by a car to be like, okay, now let me show you how to cross the street. You show them how to cross the street first. It's the same thing with these social issues, right? So it means that we as community, we as parents, we as teachers have to do enough work in terms of having a great analysis over it so we can then teach it. And not just teach it in a way where we have a critique about it, but teach it in a way where we offer solutions. What is the solutions to deal with racism, microaggressions, job discrimination? How do we have to talk about it, right? And then outlook. I think it's really important that we give our children great positive experiences. The museums in Oakland, I think it's like it's the first, third Sunday of the month, like they're all free. And what's interesting, like, I typically don't see a lot of brown people there. It's usually a lot of white folks there because a lot of brown people don't know it's free, but you should take your children to all these events. They're free. The museums are free, and it's really important because those are the things that help to enrich our children's lives. We need to give our children more moments to laugh, more moments to play, more moments of joy. What are we doing? We're helping to shape their outlook, helping to shape their demeanor, because we know in urban communities and poor communities that sometimes oppression and just what's present in those communities could be downtrodden to the spirit. People need to laugh and have joy. The first Sunday of the month, yep. So I'll leave you with this, and I appreciate you all listening. What I hope is that people understand that those three variables that I've lifted, the environment, the people, and the perception, are most important in terms of awakening the genius of our young children. And there's never a point in which it's too late. Even when a child is 18 years old, and I say a child at 18, no disrespect to anybody in the room, but I think until you start paying your own bills, you might still be a child. I'm just saying. One thing I mean, it's funny. It was funny. I didn't realize all the stuff my mother was doing until I went to college. And what I mean by that is, like, you have to buy stuff you never had to buy before, like oven mitts. You ever try to cook something in your new apartment, and you're like, how am I gonna get that out the oven? You know how the oven mitts. Those are grown people issues. Kids don't think about that kind of stuff. I'm just saying. I appreciate you all.
Questions, comments? Yes. Excellent. I'm really taken by this
Can you get
issue of the different levels of readiness and learning styles that educators, leaders, organizers, facilitators have to deal with. And I'm wondering the role of technology from your point of view with this. I mean, because you don't have the capacity to really get deep enough with 20 people to know what they're ready for. You know, so how do we use technology from your perspective right now? Because there are many different platforms.
Right.
And there are very few people who are not using some form of technology.
Yeah.
Especially young people.
Well, I think what you're talking about. I think what you're talking about is how do we bridge that gap, and it's difficult. I think one of the things that we're encouraged to use are assessments. So early on, doing a writing assessment to kind of see people are at around their comprehension, understanding, and so I do a lot of that in terms of beginning. It might be an assignment. The students don't even know I'm doing an assessment. I just be like, okay, tell me about your goals and what you want to learn in this class. And they write it down, and that's part of my assessment. So that's part of it. I think it's harder to do in general, even with technology. And so what we have to do, often we're using it in the sense of picking a topic versus a whole lesson. So you could pick a topic and go very deep on because you might start everybody from the same point. So what it typically means is that we're starting baseline for everybody, and that we're trying to grow up. And so for me, I'm very transparent in my classrooms. I tell people, if this seems remedial or whatnot, this is because we're building on it. But we have to go through that process, because if we don't, then we're leaving somebody behind. And so what the process for me is really helping people to have more of a community because then it's more of a supportive process. The other piece that I do that has nothing to do with technology is sometimes I partner people in my classes. And so I'll take people from different backgrounds, different learning styles, and put them all in the same group on a project. So then they have to develop each other through that project. But it's very difficult. And I think it's a problem that a lot of folks don't have to deal with in communities where the schools are well resourced. At Merritt, we get students across the board. We have students that went to public schools, private schools, Catholic schools, some folks homeschool. We get the gamut, and then we have to support success across the board. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
This lecture was very empowering, and I say that because I'm a Southerner, and I'm from North Carolina. So growing up in an all-black community and perception of being just seen as a stereotype as a criminal, or just, because I played basketball when I retired, you know. And the funny thing is that learning from this lecture is that I gave up my contract to play in China, to return to school. So I returned to school because of knowing that how important not just education is, but just the fact of like the topic that you were speaking about, how the people around you know, right. Even at 28, I'm still gonna be the first generation, you know, like that graduate from college. Yeah. And then not just that, it's just like I know people that didn't even make it through middle school. So it's like you said, it's bigger than you and your educational goals, because you're thinking people not looking at you, but they are. Right. You know, me transitioning over here, it's like I have so many people that are looking for me to, you have those people that's gonna look for you to fail, but you have just as many looking for you to succeed. Yeah. So, you know, it's, like you said, it's more than just your educational path. You know, it's more than who are you empowering and what are you doing? You know, are you staying focused? Like with social media, I use it as a platform for positivity, you know, because I know everybody's watching. And so, you know, like you said, it's all the ways how you go about it. Yeah. So I do appreciate the speech and the lecture.
I appreciate that. Thank you. There's another hand? Yes.
I just want to start off by saying, number one, I came late. I'm so sad that I got here late. But what I did hear was phenomenal, and I'm really thankful for that. The work that I do is making sure that our young people in core community and continuation schools have the same level of access and availability to career pathways as young people in traditional schools. What I do know, though, after having been in the education system for many, many years, is that unfortunately, those who get into teaching don't necessarily know how to teach, yes. Right? They know the content, but they don't understand the relationships that need to be developed. And I just really want to appreciate that you spoke to that, because that is so important. You cannot begin to teach a young person without establishing some level of relationship. Yeah. And that's how you get to know your students. Yes, there are assessments, and of course those things work to some capacity, right? But I think it's just so much more important that we recognize the importance of relationship with our young people. And young people who are in your course, they are fortunate to have someone who can see that. Because oftentimes what happens is that you have people who are like, I'm here for the subject, not really connecting with the fact that in order for you to even get through, you have to know who your audience is. You have to look at that audience in a number of different ways. You have to provide different levels of engagement to that audience. So I just want to appreciate that. And then I want to ask, you know, what is happening on the Peralta front, I'll say, I won't even put it to Merritt, but on the Peralta front, that is helping staff to see the importance of the relationship so that it's beyond the content, because we know that you know the content. But what is happening, or do you see that happening, or are you working with peers, or what's going on there?
Well, I think I think that schools that are preparing teachers are doing a poor job, only because they do teach pedagogy, they do teach curriculum development. They never have youth development. Sometimes our teachers have never had any interactions with young people. It's like their first time. That's problematic. I think the other thing you talk about is when we talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, like you have to know your audience. People of African ancestry are relationship-based people. We will go to a dentist because we know that dentist. Students take classes because they like certain teachers. We're relationship-based people, so the relationship is instrumental, but it's also cultural, right? So folks have to be willing to explore what is the culture to bring the culture into the classroom. I always tell people, if you're talking about culturally relevant pedagogy, it is not a day, it's not an activity. It is infused throughout the curriculum. And you don't have to call it African-centered. You don't have to call it multicultural. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But I guarantee this, if you explore the people that's in the class culturally, you will have a different experience. So I think that's not taught. In terms of merit, as a lot of my colleagues and I have a lot of these discussions, and we've invested some like professional development in terms of just giving people opportunities to kind of connect with this information. We've had Sean Jim Wright come to the campus. So we've had people come that really have began to emphasize the importance of it. And I think the synergy is so great that even if people weren't necessarily ready for it, they have to get ready for it. I think because there's a greater emphasis that's coming down to like really support student success, and we have to change how we're teaching, and it's not just like in some kind of like negative way. I feel like every year I change my curriculum. So I've had students that have dropped my class and they got to come back and take it again. They be like, it's different. Yeah, it is. I mean, because I can't teach the same exact things, but it's like I'm always trying to develop myself as well. And I think if you're invested in the field of education and invested in student success, you can't do the same things you were doing 5 years ago, even 2 semesters ago for that matter. It has to be a change.
Hi, I work with a service provider. I actually, you know Mahea, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm Mahea's coworker. So we work with a group of students in New Haven Unified School District. And I was listening to what you were saying about creating these like different spaces and stuff and cultivating them on campus. And I'm not necessarily a traditional teacher, in which we do have a classroom, but we don't teach throughout the day. We more so have them after school. And I'm curious about how you would suggest like creating spaces like what you spoke about in the face of like the school not being as welcoming as an environment. I wouldn't tier it as with like Oakland Unified, definitely not. But I know that distinctively when you walk in, it feels sterile. A lot of the schools just feel sterile, and they're just not welcoming in the interactions that not only that I hear about, but what I see is just like, you can't learn here, you know? And I'm, I guess, wondering like how I can like create that space and maintain it for the students, and then like have them trust that we're not part of, I guess, like that bigger entity. And then also how to like maintain what I'm trying to implement to the kids when the family isn't as engaged, because to me all of this is nice, but if the family isn't engaged also, then it's like you're kind of, it's not gonna like work all the way. So when the family's not engaged and when the school isn't engaged, how do we kind of like work as an island to help these kids?
Well, I mean, the question you ask are some of the challenges a lot of people are facing. So I'll start off by saying the relationship piece we were just talking about will help create that environment. So you might have to do some like footwork in terms of building those relationships one-on-one. Word of mouth is everything. On this campus, you know who all the teachers are that are liked and not liked. Not because of, you know, anything in terms of what the teacher's doing, but more so around how students perceive what the teachers are doing, and they talk. I hear stuff about instructors that are over at Laney, and I don't teach at Laney. So if you build healthy relationships and you're offering something that supports their needs, they're going to want to be there and they're going to talk about it. So you have to be able to create those relationships first, then whatever environment, whatever physical space you have, get their input on how they want that space to be. What do they want? How they want it to, you know, what kind of food, how they want it to smell, what the sound should be, what the routines are. They have to own that space to make that space theirs. So the relationship will help you create the physical space. And even if the school is stale, but you do those things, they'll be there, right? And I think sometimes we have to kind of be savvy, because one of the things I've noticed is that if you go to most schools, when the bell rings, there's umpteenth programs inside of a school, umpteenth programs inside of the school. But the bell has rang, and everybody leaving, and where'd everybody go? Outside the gate or in front of the school. And what they doing? Nothing. Like nothing, just talking. They're just talking. There's nothing. So to me, like you have to make sure that space has a social appeal. Because if it doesn't have a social appeal, they're going to leave your program just to stand outside the gates, right? So that also means that part of your relationship or recruitment might be going outside those gates and having conversations or figuring out, like, how do you engage that group outside the gate. That make sense? It's another question.
Can I ask what you just said?
Yeah.
A lot of it, excuse me, being that growing up, like wherever you grow up in your environment, like poverty, a lot of students don't have a relationship with themselves. Just like you said, self-esteem. Like I had to learn that throughout a lot of my teenage years, because not having a relationship like in school or outside of class, because a lot of like what I went through is avoiding being home because it was a broken home. So a lot of things you have to, like you said, you have to build like a lot of self-esteem, or teachers have to, engage and have a relationship and to build that self-esteem in their students or self-confidence. Because a lot of students, such as myself, like battle with that, learning that I have to first believe in myself as well.
Can I also add just real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's really important too that maybe you don't, so you talk about them going outside the gate. I did after school programs for a long time, and what I would do is let them have that social time and start our programming after that, so that they can go out and they have an opportunity to get all of that out, and then you come to our program. It's also important too that they see themselves in that space and what they create. So you have to put their work up, and it's not up to us to judge, that they color in the lines, and that's a really nice one, so we're gonna put that up. But to be mindful that they need to see and be a part of the environment. So let them create the table, so let them figure out, because I think it's so important for buy-in that young people feel like it belongs to them. And when they don't feel like that, they don't care about the space, they trash it, they don't. But when you say, what furniture do you want in here? And they actually get to see it, they say, why are you sitting on that edge like that? Get off of that, because they know that this is a part of their work. And it's important that you also give them something that maybe they haven't seen before, that's greater than what they've seen before. Because so often they get caught up in, kind of torn, so well, this was donated, so we gonna keep, and then they look at an environment that doesn't necessarily represent the greatness of what they are and who they can be.
Specifically what you're saying about asking them, I'm sorry, I know I keep going on, but what you're saying about asking them, I'm finding that that is something that they've never had before.
And we do have these conversations called youth development.
Excuse me. About what you want to eat, what you want to, like, what kind of music you want to play, like, what do you want to paint today, like, what do you want to see in the space, like, what are our community guidelines? They just kind of, I'm noticing, like, regurgitate what they think an adult wants to hear, and it's like, I don't think that's natural. I don't think it's regular for y'all to sit in a classroom for 2 hours and not speak. I know that I'm not going to sit here and not speak. So let's, like, be real about it, but they aren't used to somebody asking genuinely and wanting to know their input and then being intentional about implementing it later on.
Yeah. And the last piece I'll say about that is we live in a society where people want gratification really fast. And so sometimes it's about creating the carrot, so to speak, so people find the benefit of it. The program I ran up here this summer was a leadership academy, and I treated it like it was a regular job. They came, they got paid. If they didn't come, they didn't get paid. And when folks saw they wasn't getting paid, they came every day. But at the end, folks was like, I don't even care if I get paid. But it was the initial step for get the carrot, so to speak, in the room. And so you got to figure out, like, what is that incentive? Is it a trip? What is it that supports them finding value in that space? Yes.
I just wanted to say, the program that I work in, we say that people don't care what you have to say until they know that you care. And so if you have educators there that don't care anything about the students, the first thing they're going to do is shut them out. They're not going to take anything in that they say or that they bring. They know when they're cared about, and when the children know that the teacher cares about them, they're going to learn. And then what the teachers bring in to them, the material and information they bring to them, it shows that they care about them by what they're doing with them and the information that they're bringing. And then they're going to learn in that environment. So, like you were saying about Merritt, like Professor Seals cares about his students. The other professors on here that you're talking about, the people We know, they know which ones care about them, and the information that they bring is to build them up and to help them, and they realize that that's the teachers they're gonna go to. And they're not gonna, the other ones, you just force it on them. They don't wanna be in there with them. They're just forced on you. You just have to sit there, and they're just baiting their time until they get out of there.
Well, I appreciate you all. So one last hand. We're going to hear. I'll talk to you afterwards.
I'm sad I missed the whole presentation, the beginning of the presentation, but from what I did hear, a lot of stuff resonated with me. In particular, I was thinking about, my dad has worked in public education my entire life, like mostly for Oakland School District. But, I think about how he has, been involved and run some teacher trainings in the past, and some of just the critiques we've talked about in terms of, I think other people have already mentioned this, how a lot of teachers are not being trained in cultural competency or youth development whatsoever. So they're not equipped to prepare students in any kind of way. Even me as a student, especially when I was younger, it was very hard for me to deal with certain teachers who did not know how to deal with me. I was in the principal's office all the time. I'm being told that I'm behind in all these subjects because I wasn't able to be communicated with in an effective way, because I was there's different learning styles. I was like a more hands-on student, I was more visual student. There were certain ways that I learned that was very different than a few teachers had ever been exposed to or ever even heard of. There were certain conversations my dad had with a teacher, and they were completely unaware of different learning styles, even though they had been taught that or should be taught that when you're going through your credentials. So I think that's something that overall in our public education system, that's something that is going to have to be reformed on every level. And I think it's also another thing that, for me, I'm an optimistic person, but at the same time, I look at it as a very, very big task for everyone to be invested in. So I think it's beautiful, of course, what you're doing in your classes and other teachers I know here are doing in their classes. And I think just trainings in general is a really good thing to focus on. Also thinking about teachers that can relate to their students. I know you touched on that, but I think Black teachers in particular, it's very important for them to be teaching Black students. So that's all.
Yeah, this conversation is such a rich conversation because, some of the things you bring up, it opens up the dialogue in so many ways, And what I would say is that moving beyond this space, my hope is that we continue these conversations, right? So that it doesn't just stop here, but people are having these conversations in a very thoughtful way where people are now exploring what are some of those solutions, right? Because the reform that you're talking about is going to come through the people. It's not going to come through the system, right? It's usually the people on the grassroots in the community are the ones that actually are pushing forward the change. And so we have to continue these conversations. And so I appreciate everybody that came out and, gave feedback and had questions. Your time is valuable.